This workshop's it's been a collaboration between New South Wales farmers and the New South Wales DPI's Farm Business Resilience Program with some funding from the Australian Government's Drought Fund. And the purpose of this workshop is really to acknowledge that we are facing some pretty difficult times, and to spend a bit of time thinking about what does being future ready look like? What does it look like for me? And what are some of the things that I might need to be doing to be future ready? So we're going to spend some time in conversation today. We're going to spend some time doing some reflection on our own readiness, and hopefully you'll pick up some things here about also what's needed to support you. We're going to hear from you a little bit about what the future might hold for you, some of the things you're thinking about. We're going to have a think about what will it take to be ready. We've got a little bit of content in the workbook that we're going to look at, but what this workshop is not, is it's not going to be a lecture from me about these different aspects of what is it that helps us to be ready. Conversations are wonderful things, and they're actually, we sort of talk about being in conversation is one way that humans make sense of things. And there's a lot of stuff that we are trying to make sense of at the moment with what we're dealing with. If we're listening well, we can sometimes move beyond, say, that initial judgment that may come up because someone's sharing a perspective that we've heard before or we don't like. And we as humans are really good at judging other things. It's like a superpower we all have. And it's not a bad thing. It's just something that if we can acknowledge and if we can notice it in a conversation, sometimes that can really support us to listen well and to be open to things that are different. We all have something to contribute. It doesn't matter how long you've been in the game or what game you're in. So just taking 30 seconds now, don't need to think a long time about this, just what's really present for you now, we can pop down. And on this post-it note, we're going to put your current challenge and then one that you're you'd like to get ready for as we move into the future on the other post-it note. There's a bit of a heaviness around this season that we're heading into and what we're heading into it with. And one of the things we want to talk about is that sort of this notion that if we're trying to think about being future ready, like how are we ever going to get ready for the future if we're constantly pivoting to just deal with right now? The purpose of this little piece here is really just to say, yeah, there's a lot, and actually we don't have control of a lot of it. And not only do we not have control of it, but actually a lot of it we don't see. For example, the drought we can see, we can see the condition of the vegetation, we can see levels in rivers and dams, we can see our infrastructure, we can see that it needs replacing. So there are things that are we can see, they're out there. Whether we sell now or later, it's a decision that sits underneath. It's a whole bunch of factors that will drive that decision, and it's taking up space in our minds and in our relationships and in our business, and it's there. It's still there when the drought worsens or when the fire comes or when the flood comes. So it's noticing that this notion of actually most of what's going on for us, most of what is occupying our time is happening kind of in this invisible sector. We had interest rates. We talked about this idea of the next generation. So what are we seeing in terms of opportunities for succession for people to take up a role in the industry? So we can't control much of it, but there's stuff we can control. And there's stuff that we can stay in choice about and bring our attention to. We're either choosing to persist, to adapt, or to transform. So there are a couple of points here. One is if you farm in Australia, you do all of these things every day. You are resilient by definition. We need all of these things. We do them in the face of challenge. We default to our strong suit. and it often takes a huge toll. It takes a toll financially, it takes a toll on our mental health, on our physical well-being. So how can we get ahead? How can we gather the information we need so that we're in choice? We're making choices ahead of time about, or when the moment comes, we're making the choice knowing that we've resourced ourselves to be able to get through that. If you go to the back of your workbook, you will notice that you have a post-it note with either persist, adapt, or transform written on it. So the invitation now is to tell a short story, about a time when you did that. So when I persisted, or when I showed persistence, when I showed adaptability, when I showed, and the challenge here is you've got 2 minutes to tell a story. For a farm business, like what it takes to be ready is to be across a whole number of different parts of your farm business. And we've got these 5 areas here that we've sort of loosely categorized a bunch of things into. Some of them will be very familiar to you and you'll feel very comfortable with what's here. So strategic business management, risk management and decision making, natural resource management, succession planning, and personal and social resilience. So what we're going to do is do a little bit of a self-assessment. And if you look at the bottom of page 31, we've got this little bit of a scale. So the invitation here is to score each of the little bullet points. And number 1 is for, I'm just starting the journey. So I'm beginning to think about ways to take action. So I'm beginning to think about, the people management in my enterprise, or I'm beginning to think about how I'm collecting and using data on the farm under my risk management. Or maybe I've noticed that whether it's through my parents or through my kids, that succession planning is something I really want to think about. So I'm going to start doing some estate planning with that. And maybe I need to pay attention to my physical well-being or my emotional well-being, or join a community group. So I'm starting the journey, I'm starting to think about these things. Scoring a 2, I'm on the path to readiness. I've started planning and considering different aspects of the farm business. So these are the ones where I've engaged a consultant, or I had a meeting with LLS, or I've chatted to my neighbour, or I've spoken to a friend, and we started to think about how I'm diversifying my enterprise, or how I'm looking at some of the water management on my farm. I'm looking at a new plan for dams, and someone came over and said, yeah, this place is good. And, it's starting there, but, it's a work in progress. And then the 3, which is that I'm feeling future ready. Now, I'd debate whether again, it's a natural tendency of ours to sort of not think of what we're doing as really good. So we often will say, yeah, I'm not doing so well at that, when actually we are doing really well at it. So it's an invitation to look at it and go, actually, I actually have put a fair bit of work into that. I've got a pretty good plan. I've thought it through. I may need to tweak it, but I'm feeling pretty ready with that area. I've paid a lot of attention to maybe how I'm connected in my community and how I participate as a volunteer in groups. I've paid a lot of attention to a financial plan for the business, and it's looking pretty solid. And even it's everything is thrown up by current cattle prices, but I've done the work to know how to tweak that, or to actually let it inform a decision that I need to make. So, in your own time, it'll be about sort of 5 or 6 minutes for this. There should be a pen on your table. Just go through each one and give yourself a little bit of a score. And you're not going to show this to anyone. You're not going to report to anyone on it. You might want to take it and show a partner, or back at home, but it's ultimately for your own purposes here. The challenge is with listening is to allow the person who's speaking to have that space to speak what they're thinking. Because another thing about some humans, not all of us, but I know I'm guilty of this one, is like, I know what I'm thinking once I've heard what I'm saying. And so sometimes, and also when things come out of our mouth, we start to make sense of them differently. And we start to make sense of them in conjunction with others, through others' input and reaction. So this is a little exercise in speaking and listening. So the topic of your conversation is, like, what are you learning about being future ready? What did you just learn in that last exercise? What's coming up for you that you came here with, or that's emerging in the time that you've been here? This is actually a really important part of working with positive psychology. This is a thing. It's a lot of evidence around how we can support our brain to move through difficult times. And this involves things like gratitude practices, about growth mindsets, things that help us to stay in it when it gets tough and to think about the possibilities rather than the lack of possibilities. The next piece is about sort of taking what the essence of what's just been in those conversations and listening to kind of what's bubbling up for you. And if you turn to page 34 in the little booklet, there's a little planning template. And I just want you to focus on the left-hand page at the moment. We'll deal with the other one in a little bit. But so based on the things you've been talking about now, like with what area you might be looking to focus on, what areas you've already got strengths in, and look, this stuff will arrive at different times for different people. It's not about actually having to have it all figured out at any point, let alone right now. But what the opportunity now is to take whatever is starting to crystallize in your mind about a possible next step, is just to start to jot that down. So put a little tick next to which of the areas, is my next step. Have I noticed that, particularly around personal and social resilience, that's somewhere where I need to focus some attention now based on what I'm learning. So just put a little tick there and just think about what the action might be that you're going to take next. And this next one, what does it achieve? So this idea of how do I frame it? How do I think, if this worked well, this would be the outcome? What difference is it going to make to me, to my life, to my business? And the things to consider in this is, how's it going to help me to persist, adapt, or transform? What resources have I already got to support this action, and what resources do I still need? So just take a couple of minutes, just take a couple of notes, what's starting to take shape for you, or what maybe is already very well formed. So just now, just in your little groups or in pairs next to each other, just little practice saying, my next action is in this area, and this is what I'd like to do. How this is going to work is that there'll be one table for each of the 5 areas of business resilience. So like right here, we've got succession planning. So if you would like to have a conversation about succession planning, come and sit at this table and you see who else comes to that table, and you share some information and talk about why you're there. If you align particularly with one of the areas of business resilience, the invitation is to go and sit at that table and to support the people who are there with good questions, but also with your own stories and good listening. I'm going to do this for about 10 minutes. So again, not a long time, but enjoy your conversations. On that second half of that action plan page is somewhere to capture, like, who can support me, and what do the next steps look like for me? So if there might have been something that came up in the conversation you've just had. And really the last thing that I want to say is thank you for taking the time to be here, but also that if we go back to our iceberg, like one of the things here is we're not meant to do this on our own. Like we're not meant to do this stuff on our own. So it's like, gather that team around you, gather the people who encourage you, the people who have the information that you might need, the people who have the resources that you might be able to draw on. Gather that around and start or continue the conversations that are going to support you through some of these times. So it's lovely saying that, like, if we want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together.